Get started. Welcome. This is the April 2nd meeting of the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee. Let's start with introductions. Tom Burhan. Yes. You're over here.
Jim Green, Kimber CSD.
Yeah, Jim Marderosian, B Sweet Citrus.
Oh,
And
hold on.
Hold on, we can't hear over here.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Nick T, City of San Luis Obispo.
Thank you, Nick.
Scott Duffield, for the Grant Community Services District.
Mary Van Ryn, Agriculture.
John Winstead, and I got work.
Maria Kings, if you need the district. You'll follow WRAC.
One reduction, County of San Luis Obispo Public Works. Alejandro Celio, Slow County Public Works.
Betty Widows, resident Laurel Bay.
Rick Graywall, representative of the Cattlemen's Association.
And over to Eric.
Eric Greening, Environmental at Large.
Christine Mulholland, Environmental at Large.
Audit the not baby chipping environmental knowledge. Dominic Brock, Coastal San Luis RCB.
Ed EV, the almost CSD. Kim Gaffney, of Right Ready.
Peter Brown, the CSD.
Jan Mark, City, San Luis Obispo City.
Maybe we were just before alternate.
Steve Simpson, San Juan Water District.
His favorite brother.
Matt Coates, Golden State Water.
I'm Joey Style, County Public Works, Water Resources Division. Brendan Clark, County Public Works, Water Resources Committee Secretary.
And online, Joey, who do we have?
Yeah, so for the folks who are attending online via Zoom, please feel free to introduce yourself as I call your name. Jim.
Jim Marderosian, B Sweet Citrus. And I guess at the next meeting, I will be representing District 3.
Great, thank you, Jim. Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Poitras. I'm with Stantec Consulting Services, and I will be providing a presentation today.
Thank you. Mark Madison.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Madison. I am a consultant representing or assisting the Edna Valley Growers Mutual Water Company.
All right. Seth Peak.
Yes, I'm Seth Peak, Tascadero City Council member.
Thanks, Seth. Matthew Scudato.
Hi, Matt Scudato, Santa Barbara County Water Agency.
All right. Ron Munns.
Ron Munns, Los Osos CSD.
Right. Lee Nesbitt.
Nesbitt EPC.
Thank you. Matt Watkins.
Matt Watkins, B Sweet Citrus.
Hey, Courtney Howard.
Hello, Courtney Howard, Water Resources Division Manager for Public Works.
Right. Jenny Williamson.
Jenny Williamson, County Public Works, Water Resources.
All right. John Hollenbeck.
I'm John Hollenbeck with Hollenbeck Consulting in Atascadero.
Thank you. Charlotte Arnau.
Hello, Charlotte Arnao with Confluence Engineering Solutions.
Mark Zimmer.
Good afternoon, Mark Zimmer, General Manager for Golden State Water Company.
Thanks, Mark. We have, I think, two folks we didn't get to yet. Kershaw, is that correct?
Yeah, hi, Tim Kershaw from Clee Terrace Geologists.
Thank you. And let's see, we have someone joining on iPhone.
That's Aline.
Oh, Aline, yes. All right, did we capture everyone else? Did we get to everyone online? I think so.
Okay, thank you, Joey. Yep. And we do have a quorum present in the room.
Yeah,
very good. All right. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. So the next agenda item then, after introductions, is approval of the March 5th, 2025 minutes. I'll entertain a motion for approval or correction. Why are you laughing, Christine?
I move approval as submitted.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dominic. Any comments or corrections? Not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Right. Then we'll move on to item 3, which is received presentation from Stantec. I think Brendan's going to do a brief introduction, and then Stantec will take it over on the big screen.
That is correct. In just a moment while I get this shared here. Okay. All right. As a little intro, I know everyone sees the title here. Receive a presentation from Stantec on the SB 552 water system consolidation analysis and provide feedback. And so this is similar to the item we had last month with WSP, who's working with our county OES, our emergency services, on creating our hazard mitigation plan. And during that presentation, I kind of thought, oh, I wish I had done a little intro, give some context. So we're going to try to do that here, if this will work. And so the questions I'm going to try to answer here real briefly are: why is Stantec here today? Why are we doing a consolidation analysis? And where does it fit with district efforts? And so quickly about Senate Bill 552, was passed in 2021 and had various requirements for small systems, counties, state departments like DWR and the Water Control Board, as well as school districts. And county staff, mostly Josh here, we provided this committee a presentation on SB 552 last October. So if you're new or you missed that meeting and you're curious and you want the full 25-minute version, I'll send you a link to that presentation. And here is a little snippet of the law. I know it's small, and this is just a portion about what the counties, have to do. Shall develop a plan or an element in an existing plan that, at a minimum, has an analysis of consolidations for existing water systems and domestic wells. So that's why we are doing an analysis of consolidation, and Stantec will get into what that analysis is. And I'll get into here why Stantec in just a second. This, we shared this also in October. It just summarizes all those requirements, a bit of the law I just shared. And we went through here. This drought and water shortage plan has these various components. And what we told you in October is we're going to be using existing plans or other new efforts to create a functional equivalent of this drought and water shortage plan. And the elements we were going to use are our master water report, which is in development, state technical assistance, and the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, which we heard about last month. And that covered the drinking water mitigations, emergency and interim solutions, funding opportunities, and things like that. And so for consolidation, there are a few options were, to open to us as county staff. In meeting this, we could do our own effort, could written our own scope and done our own project management. But the state does offer technical assistance for counties to do any part of SB 552 compliance. And so we coordinated with the state and asked them, hey, would your consultant be willing to do this part for us as we create our functional equivalent plan? And the answer was yes. And so Josh has been coordinating with them diligently to make sure we have this part kind of checked off. And so that is why Stantec is here and why we're doing consolidation. And for those curious, the contract is between DWR and Stantec, and then we helped write the scope for that and are part of making sure the work is being done. And the last thing I want to share is where it fits in. And there's a ton going on here. And but I did just want to kind of show a little bit of the bigger picture. This is something staff will be talking about more and more in the coming months as we next month talk about our district budget and the work going on with the desal plan. As we bring back the master water report, show you what we've been doing here for the last year. How are these things fitting together and where did it all kind of come from? And so the main thing I want to point out is we've had, as everyone knows, droughts and these multi-year droughts over the last 10, 15 years, and different actions have come out of that. Locally, we did our regional water infrastructure resiliency plans, which was one thing we did. Also a previous presentation to the committee. So if you want to know more about that, let me know. And this introduced an idea of looking at some of our larger water systems, medium-sized water systems, for resiliency to certain water shortage criteria, system failures or long-term droughts or things like that. At the same time, the state was looking at, we need to do resiliency and risk analysis across the whole state, and we need to make all our counties do that for us. And so out popped SB 552, and which has these various requirements, consolidation analysis, and the things we're putting in our hazard mitigation plan, and ongoing kind of risk. How vulnerable are your systems, your communities, your wells to drought, which is something we'll capture a little bit in the master water report. And so maintaining these plans and systems is how we're going to satisfy SB 552. And just kind of wanted to show too, coming out of the drought was, the desal planning effort. It's been authorized by the board, which I believe we'll be hearing more about next month. And as well as, our update to the master water report. And these are going to have ongoing reporting and operations. And I'm going to leave it right there as a tease for future presentations and what we're developing, but wanted to show a little bit of how what you're hearing about today fits into that bigger picture of what district staff is working on and planning for, water supply opportunities, planning for future droughts, and things like that. So with that setup, I'm going to turn it over to Stantec to talk about the analysis.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now.
Yep, I'm going to get you set up.
Okay.
Yep.
I sent a request.
Should be good. It'll be just a second, I think.
Are you able to see my screen now?
Yep.
Awesome. So hi again. My name is Carrie Poitras. I'm with Stantec. I'm in the Santa Barbara office, and I'm going to be talking about the water systems consolidation. So our agenda for today is we already did our brief introductions. Thankfully, the county made an introduction as well, and I'm going to talk about the water system consolidation method and some of the changes that we've made. And then we're going to talk about a few questions at the end. And feel free to ask questions as we go through these different slides because there's quite a bit of information on each one. So I wanted to point out, and hopefully you guys already realize that there's a lot of wells within the county. And this basically is showing the existing wells over their prioritized groundwater basins, but the county was able to provide information to us, letting us know that there's over 15,000 domestic private wells, and there's 27 state small water systems. And then there's also 83 public water systems fully within San Luis Obispo County. So these water systems can include water systems for the cities, community services districts, special districts, mutual water companies, water systems for schools, and also water companies such as Golden State. So this basically is showing the overlap of those private wells and the state small systems overlapped with those water systems. And basically the big driver that we're trying to show is that there are a lot of opportunities for consolidations within the systems and showing how close some of these private wells and other systems are to one another. So we're going to be following a method by the California Water Board. It's a physical consolidation method looking at the costs to come up with for those consolidations. So there's 5 steps. And the first is to identify a joining and receiving system. And we'll go over what those joining and receiving systems mean. Then it's a GIS analysis step. And the GIS analysis is primarily focused on the distance between the receiving and joining stations, the distance of the private wells. The third step is to calculate the costs. And there's various costs that were set up by the state. And then the fourth is to evaluate whether or not, based on the distance and the costs of those consolidations, evaluating whether they are viable for funding, if they meet those funding thresholds. And then the last step is to look at any additional long-term needs. So if certain existing water systems are already having issues with their supply or water quality, there's additional costs that would need to be added to those to take those into consideration. So first, we are trying to follow this method pretty closely. We looked at both joining and receiving systems. The receiving system is the best way to think about it is that it's the larger system. It's typically a public water system, and the joining system is the smaller system. And the route between them we're going to use that term pretty often. It basically follows along the roadways. So it's the distance followed along a roadway between the smaller system of the joining system and the larger system for the receiving. So within this method, there's criteria of what is considered a joining system. And so the state's method basically looked at the safer status of the system and put certain criteria to them. So the state said, well, if it's a failing public water system, it could be a joining system if it has less than 1,000 connections. During the internal working group meeting that we had a month ago, we decided to change these criteria a little bit because we wanted to still include potentially at risk, not at risk, and not assessed public water systems as a joining system. And we looked at that basically that there's still opportunity for consolidation, even though systems that may not have any problems may not have incentive to consolidate, but we wanted to include them in the process. So we set up a criteria of basically any system less than 500 connections could be a joining system. And then the state small water systems and domestic wells, we included them regardless of their status. And then a receiving system is the larger system. And same thing, we looked at regardless of their safer status. And we basically looked at just what's the nearest closest largest system, could be the receiving system, and what's the distance between them, basically the largest nearby system. So this status basically means that a receiving system could be a failing or at-risk public water system, but we felt that they should still be included. And to note that state small systems and domestic systems are not considered receiving systems under this criteria. So receiving systems. We had asked the question to the internal working group if we should exclude any of the systems that are at risk or failing. So this map shows the various water systems throughout the county that are either at risk or failing. So it was kind of interesting to look at, the location of these various systems. We did actually have a conversation with LAFCO already, and they had noted to us that San Simeon CSD has applied for to dissolve their CSD, and they're still looking at various options to be considered of what to do with that community system. And then the Higuera apartments, which is in the kind of the center of this map, those Higuera apartments, that the annexation was already approved by the SLO City Council back in July of last year. So those systems are still noted on our analysis, but there's going to be some changes coming along with those in the future. So our next step was to look at the distance criteria. And I know I'm going through this pretty fast, but basically we're looking at if there's wells or other state small systems that are already intersecting a larger system. So if they're fully within, basically the distance is 0. A route is following along the road that you can connect a joining system to a receiving system, or a state small system to a receiving system, or a private well. And these distances become pretty important. Basically, it's an understanding of associated with a cost. So if things get too expensive, then they're not going to consolidate. So it's basically looking at, we stuck with the 3 miles distance between a joining system or receiving system between public water systems. But when it comes to the state small systems and the domestic wells, the distance reduced, and basically assuming that those smaller systems would not be able to pay, or it would be infeasible for them to be able to pay for a longer distance. So the route for state small water systems is actually reduced down to 0.38 miles, and same for domestic wells. And then a route intersect is basically if there's a joining system or receiving system that has a route, and then if there's any state small water systems or domestic wells kind of along that route, those were included as a route intersect. Then the third step basically assigns a cost to the various connections. So a pipeline distance, $220 per linear foot. So this was estimated by the state. It assumes a cost based on material cost for 12-inch PVC C900 pipe with a material cost of $55 per linear foot, and then assumes an installation cost of $165 per linear foot. We found that this might be a little bit low, but I think it kind of gets made up for in some other different contingencies. But noting that for recent construction prices, construction bids within Santa Barbara County, this cost for 12-inch PVC pipe total for installation and pipe material was closer to $300 per linear foot. So one of our constant kind of questions that we have back to the county is, should we make any adjustments to these costs? But at this time, we're kind of sticking with these costs here. And then we also need to add in connection costs. So when you're connecting to a public water system, let's say, a type of city, they typically have connection fees. So the state had estimated, basically looked at all the various connection fees and came up with some ballparks that we're going to be using. And then same with adding in connection service line costs, administration costs, CEQA costs. And then there's also an addition of treatment costs, if there needs to be an additional source or treatment that's needed for like a failing system. Contingency, and one of our questions was, basically there's a contingency line item here for any failing or at-risk risk systems. But our question is, maybe we should add this contingency of 20% regardless of the status of the system. So that's one of our questions that we'd like to pose to this group. And then there's an line item for inflation. So this inflation number was forecast between April 2023 and April 2024. So we know that we need to adjust this inflation percentage to be increased up to 2025 numbers. So that's going to be an adjustment that we'll make. And then adding costs for planning and construction. One of the things that I also want to note that there is a multiplier that we put in. So SLO County is considered a suburban county. So there is a multiplier of 30%. Now that does help a little bit to cover the costs, like going back and thinking about the costs for the pipeline costs, but we still might consider upping the cost for that a little bit. And this all comes into play into understanding whether or not these consolidations, based on the distance, based on the cost of that, construction between the distance, is it really viable? Could a system actually do this? And so the state had put together some criteria, and it's basically looking at public water systems greater than 75 service connections. Basically, they're saying the total cost per each connection, if it's less than $96,000 per connection, they consider that viable. And then looking at public water systems, greater than 75 connections, and then less than 75 connections, total capital cost is at less than 7.2 million. These are pretty high numbers. A domestic well, if the capital cost to connect is less than 150,000. That's still a lot of money, but basically the state set these thresholds, and they increased it as well. And the inflation, it was inflated by 20%, and that inflation rate was set by DDW and DFA. So we can further discuss, with the county, should these, and with this group, should these be adjusted and whether or not they're really actually viable. And then step 5 is looking at any additional other costs that need to be considered. Treatment costs, additional source. So let's say a system only has a single source, so they would need to install or construct another backup supply in order to be able to add more customers. Is there any essential infrastructure that needs to be replaced or maintained? A lot of these systems have aging infrastructure, and that's a huge cost on some of these various systems. So should that cost be included? And this step basically takes that into account. So I know there was a lot of information, a lot of steps that we went through, but we basically have started on the distance criteria, and we have set up and was able to look at which systems can be considered receiving systems and which systems are going to be considered joining systems. So out of the 83 public water systems that we had mentioned previously, 25 of those systems meet the criteria for the receiving system, meaning that they're basically over 500 connections. And of those 25, there are a couple that have a safer status. That there's 3 systems that are at risk and 4 systems, or 3 systems that potentially at risk and 4 systems that are at risk. So this is just a table summarizing our GIS analysis for those receiving systems. And then next, the joining systems. So out of those total 83, we have 58 that are then considered joining systems. These are ones that are less than 500 connections. And I know you can't read the table, but basically there's a lot of systems that there's 45 that meet the criteria. So they're less than 3 miles from another system, from a receiving system, or they have an intersect, which means that they're basically all within another system, or their route between the 2 systems is less than 0.38. So there's quite a few opportunities for consolidations between the water systems. That's what this is showing. And I know the table is hard to see, but basically it lists out the joining system, what system it is, and the receiving system. So, and we also had noted, the population of the joining system, the number of service connections, and then if there's any issues with the receiving system. And then we did the same method for the state small water systems. So there's 27 state small water systems, and only 8 actually meet the criteria for a joining system. So whether or not they are intersect with another system, or they have a route or route intersect distance. So in this, for example, like the Hidden Hills Mobile Lodge is near a joining and receiving route. And there was a route for another system all the way to the San Luis Obispo Water District. So these are just listing opportunities. We're not looking at whether or not the systems are interested in consolidation yet. This is just looking at the physical distance between the various systems. And then our next step is then to look at the costs. So we did the same thing with the domestic wells. And this gets a little bit more complicated because there's quite a few domestic wells, obviously, within the county. So we have 15,178 total domestic wells. And basically, we started looking at, can we group the wells into its own system? So, but first, we found that there was over 13,000 domestic wells that are not considered within a group. But there was quite a few wells, over 1,500 wells that are within another service area. So you can see by the green dots. And then we also looked at wells that were within a short distance of a receiving system, and we also noted other wells that are within a route. But we did find that there was quite a few groupings of wells. There was 13 groupings that could connect with a with the system. So these groupings are like outlined in the hot pink and groupings of wells together. So like this one that's adjacent to the Paso Robles municipal airport, that they could group together and then connect to that water system. So this is just an example. We chose one near Paso Robles as an example because there was quite a few groupings of wells together based on like tracts of homes. The light gray designation of the domestic wells, we found that there wasn't really a great way to group them. They weren't any close to any other type of system. So those wells were not able to be consolidated for this type of analysis. So we're just in the first step. We did the first GIS step. Our next step is then to take that information, take those tables, and look at the cost. So we've done yes, it meets a physical criteria based on the distance. Then we're going to look at the cost. So that's our next step, is looking at the cost and the funded viability. And then after that, then it's basically providing this information in a report, and the county then gets to determine, how to prioritize these consolidation options. Has there been any other water systems that have shown interest in consolidation? Are there any interested private well owners that have come forward? So these are the conversations that we're continuing to have with the county and also continuing to have with LAFCO that help to prioritize these consolidations. And then also we're looking at wells within priority groundwater basins. Those maybe should be the first ones to be looked at. So we're still in our GIS analysis phase, and we're just finished the distance part, and we're going to be starting to write up our report. We have planning to have another call with LAFCO to go over our various tables with them this month and just talk about, did they see any other interested parties, any interested systems, anything that they can kind of fill us in and provide us more information. And then we're planning to provide our draft consolidation plan in June, and that's when we're going to come back to this group again to show our results further. So that's the end of my presentation. I know that was a lot of information. I just was curious if you guys had any other questions, and I can flip that back to previous slides.
Did you get a copy of this presentation?
Yes, I'll provide it to the county, and then they can provide it to the group.
Great, thank you.
Eric, I see your hand up.
Thank you. When costs, when there are costs of a merger, does that activate the Prop 218 vote? And if not, why not?
So I don't know if I heard the question fully, but basically said if the cost of a merger, does that take into account? And that's the part I didn't quite understand.
A Prop 218 vote by the people who would be paying.
Yes, so there is some other line items that we might consider adding. You're right, because there is costs to go through LAFCO and to go through the consolidation process with whatever agency it is. And these state costs, they don't really take that into account. So I think you're right. We probably need to add that line item in there. And you have to go through the LAFCO process, to consolidate or to annex into a water system, and you have to also get whatever that water system's requirements are to go through the process. And yes, that typically includes a Prop 218, for that particular water system. But there is costs associated with that. That's a good point, that we need to add those costs in that are not really accounted for here.
David.
This is basically just plumbing, right, at this stage, because it would seem to me that if you have a large gathering, then the people on the outside, the little guys who are coming in, are going to be the people in need. I wouldn't expect, for example, someone who had lots of water by himself joining just to give other people water. So the situation is this. You're going to be stuck with, in some cases, for example, a winery that has gone real deep in an area and drained all the water from the local area, and the people are in stress from that then goes to the major party and says, send me more. And I presume that kind of criteria has not been considered at this stage yet. We're just talking about the pipes, right, at this stage.
Correct. Yeah, this is just a conceptual plan to provide some opportunities maybe for the county or for the state to look a little bit further. Here's the ones that are close distance, that it's a little bit less expensive, but no, it doesn't really go into some of those points that you're making. This is just kind of an exercise to help start this whole process.
Over here, and then we'll go to Daniel. Go ahead.
Yeah, is there any funding currently available for consolidation?
Yes, there is. I don't know exactly how much it is. There's different funding at different levels. But that's one of the options and one of the items that we're going to be looking into and how to correlate that into funding opportunities. Because there is grants available, but I don't know exactly the different requirements for those funding options.
Jan?
Yeah, first a comment. I think you really need to make sure you've got the most current information. For instance, I just caught Hidden Hills Mobile Home Park in San Luis Obispo. That mobile home park has been completely demolished. There's no one living there.
Okay.
So, I mean, it just caught my eye, and so I think before you go much further, somebody somewhere needs to make sure that this data is accurate. You know what I mean? And the other thing is that there's this sprawl-inducing factor in wheeling water outside of, for instance, the city of San Luis Obispo has a policy not to wheel water outside our urban reserve lines because it's sprawl-inducing. Yeah, with one minor exception that's now being explored with the Edna Valley vendors out there, but doesn't seem to be feasible right now. So I think that the concept of this whole concept has got to also take into account land use considerations, because it could be a real disaster in terms of inducing sprawl.
Yes, I am well aware of various agencies, many steps to go through in terms of annexation or consolidation. And each different agency and city kind of has their own requirements and whatnot. And it's not necessarily infeasible, but there's definitely a lot of things that need to go through. And so our report is not going to go into the detail of each individual agency's requirements, but it is going to talk about, that research and that additional investigation and time and consideration would need to go into place for those.
Harry, I'll add to that really quick. For your first point, we have been, staff, Josh has been contacting many of these small systems.
Great.
Trying to contact them and who's currently managing, and get some information and let them know what's going on. And, hopefully through that effort, we will be, able to find the ones that maybe don't exist anymore, but are still in the state. They may still appear active in the state's database, which is,
right.
A lot is what we work off of. So there is some effort going into making sure, if we had the list of systems here, which that's not the list of systems,
yeah, the 83 total systems.
That's where that came from, the existing state database.
It did.
You wanted local control.
They don't listen.
So interestingly, Oceano's going through consolidation right now. We are bringing in multiple mobile home parks and single family residents through the SAFER program. And to Eric's question about Prop 218, they have to sign a consolidation agreement with us, agreeing to come into our system, after which they will be subject to future rate changes would be Prop 218, but there's no 218 process for the consolidation per se. But it is grant funded. We started seeking 8 million in grants, and now we enforce the state that it's up to 9.4. So we're receiving 9.4 million, basically for the construction and consolidation in the Halcyon area.
Yeah. Is that just domestic water? It's also wastewater?
Just domestic water. So if anybody wants any real world recent examples of how the SAFER program of consolidation works, let me know.
For clarity, SAFER is a program from the State Water Resources Control Board, right? It's one of their funding programs. Okay.
Yeah, so the wells, the property owners that are relying on the wells are not able to meet drinking water standards. So I think the table showed like either at risk or failing. Those are some of the criteria where the grant money becomes more available if MCLs are being met.
Other questions or comments? David?
Is there an underlying assumption that domestic wells that are consolidated will be abandoned and the consumption will be provided by the receiving system?
Typically a requirement that they're done.
Hand over here. Yes. Go ahead.
I was just curious about those connection charges and where those numbers came from. They look quite low.
They do seem a little bit low. This was basically from the state and basically looked at a bunch of different connection charges. So there's an explanation of how it was looked at, but I do feel that a number of different agencies within SLO County have higher connection fee charges. So that might be something we might want to adjust up. I don't know exactly what number to put it up to, but maybe we can do a blanket number of, 8,500 or something.
Hey, you had a question.
Now, what consideration is given to the property owner on the price of his land that he paid for what the land could provide, including the water, and what he's been taxed on for that time, and what his infrastructure costs are, and et cetera, on those kind of things, because the water that's being taken from the different areas, even though it might be considered one large basin like the Paso Basin, there's areas where the wells can be 300 to 400 feet deep, and there's areas where they need to be 1,000 feet deep, and then the infrastructure around them is what's lowering the groundwater, not the individual user that the county approved in the first place.
We got a question online from Jeff Edwards.
I don't know if she wanted to respond.
Oh,
I was just going to say, our plan really doesn't take into that. Basically, what I can say right now is that the state cannot force a private domestic well user to connect or consolidate with anyone. The state doesn't have a jurisdiction over those private wells. So it would be up to those private well owners of what they want to do.
And you said, Brennan, we had a question online?
yeah. Jeff Edwards had his hand raised for a minute there. Oh, if you want to.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I apologize for coming in late, so I'm not sure if some of my comments are going to be misplaced. But being from Los Osos, we have I think a very important case study by way of the S&T Mutual Water Company. They're a small mutual that has 171 connections, and they're increasingly being challenged with keeping pace with regulations. They have a very small infrastructure. Their location and access to the basin is not very strategic. So I think they would be a case study and should be prioritized, in my view, with the work you're doing. That's really all I had. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. No, that's good to note that. And I've made a note of that.
I don't see any other questions in the room. Any more online?
No more online.
Well, thank you. Very informative presentation. A lot to think about.
Yes, thank you all for your comments, and we'll be making some adjustments into our report for this.
I think a lot of people will be looking forward to getting a copy of your slides. Yep.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll send them to the county. I had made some small little adjustments based on their comments this morning, so I'll resend the PDF and the presentation to them.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carrie. Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you. Okay.
Right, we'll move on to item number 4, which was discuss the county's legislative platform and consider forming an ad hoc subcommittee to review. And I think several of our members had suggested at our March meeting that we form an ad hoc committee to review the county's legislative platform. And right now, I guess the 2025 platform was reviewed by the Board of Supervisors in January and sent back to staff further revisions.
There is actually an agenda item next Tuesday relative to what position the county will take on specified issues on the state legislative platform. I've not yet been able to find out which issues. I was just over at County Government Center seeing if they put the item documents out. But I do know that it is the first morning hearing after non-agenda public comment. And that relates to certain issues that may or may not have anything to do with water. And so they will be taking action Tuesday. Obviously, we can't do anything between now and then. Speaking for myself, my initial thought was relative to the federal legislative platform and essentially writing a letter asking the county to take a position of objection to the mass firings in water-related departments such as the U.S. Weather Service, the Bureau of Reclamation, and so on. That basically, yes, it is good to search for waste and fraud and corruption, but absent any finding that it exists, the mass firings that are going on now are doing significant harm. And so my first thought was not necessarily to review a whole legislative platform, but simply to send a letter on that one matter. But apparently there is interest in, and would it be both federal and state or whatever, in scouring the legislative platforms and seeing if there are either positions we might want to take that differ from what's there or new planks we might want to add. That's more or less what's before us now, or?
Well, it's a little unclear in my mind because we don't have access to whatever draft they're working on for 2025. What's out there right now online is the 2023 platform. And I'm told that the 2025 may not differ much. It doesn't tend to change a lot from iterations. So we could look at the 2023 platform and make any comments on it, and also include the items you're thinking about, Eric, but the other issue we face, as you so rightly pointed out, is that the platform could come back anytime to the Board of Supervisors and not allow us sufficient time to review a draft subcommittee. Our subcommittee, should we form one, to review a draft, bring it to this group for approval, and then send a letter to the board before the board acted upon the actual platform itself. David.
I don't know if the older platform addresses state water project supply. And there was an announcement this morning in the Maven that in an announcement to agricultural groups from the Delta, I think it was, the actual outtake through the Sacramento River from the tunnel will be 20% greater than the outtake now currently taken through the gates. And not only that, in time of drought, it will be 40% greater. So we have a conflict here. One, we mess up Antioch and the fish in the Delta, but get our water. Or B, we don't get our water and the fish in the Delta are okay. It's a sort of moral dilemma for the county because I presume we want as much water in the water project as possible. But we probably need to do some research on what exactly is going on in terms of what the Delta Tunnel implies as far as the environment in the Bay Area is concerned. So I don't know whether that's in the existing document.
There are state water policies in the document as it is now. And to answer Eric's question, I did take a peek at the legislation being considered at the board next week. I didn't see any water in there, but I quickly glanced at it. So I don't think there's anything water related in there, but.
So it's online now. They didn't have a
Yeah.
hard copy upstairs.
I saw it online.
It's online.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question for us is, do we want to form a subcommittee to make some comments, perhaps in a, along the lines Erica suggested, and also comments on the 2023 platform as a basis to say maybe there needs to be some changes or we support what's in there. And have that subcommittee come back and recommend a letter that this committee would approve and send to the board.
Yeah. May I add some commentary?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
For those who aren't familiar maybe with the platform, if you didn't, I know I only put a link in, it's a large document. I didn't want to print it out 25 times. This platform goes through various, all things under the purview of the county. There's health, social services, law enforcement. There's plenty of water things in there, and to give an example, if I recall one off memory, support, when the state provides a law like SB 552, that they also provide funding to meet it. So the county supports, no unfunded mandates. That's a double negative, but that kind of idea. And this document is adopted by the county, not by the district. But there are things that are kind of within the district's realm of, flood control, water supply, and things like that, perhaps, to be wholly complete, the document could be adopted by the district as well. And, and again, if there were, just an opportunity, if the group wanted to jump in and make comments and, in the idea of like for the best of the district, of the county, I think that's an opportunity that's in our lane as the Water Resources Advisory Committee. So I wanted to add that in there.
Christine.
I do not remember the county's legislative platform ever coming before the WRAC in years past. And I somewhat suspect that the 23 platform is something that's been out there for a few years, and if anyone dealing with water had any issues, we would have heard about it by now.
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering if that, because it's a large document, but we haven't been from any avenues notified that there are some issues there that we might find controversial or want to discuss. I'm not quite concerned about creating a committee.
My initial, when I brought this up last month, the reason I mentioned the legislative platform is because when we're dealing with a federal issue, the way the county deals with it is through its federal legislative platform. Otherwise, it isn't even germane to the county, and that's not germane to us. But it seemed as if these mass firings are an emergency situation. And, if there are a few of us that might want to collaborate on a draft letter on that specific issue between now and next month and run it by the WRAC, that certainly would satisfy my impulse in bringing up the legislative platform. It's a mechanism rather than a task I was thinking we would be assigning to ourselves. In other words, the existence of the legislative platform is the way to get the crisis of mass firings in agencies important to the water picture in front of the people we advise.
Do we need an ad hoc committee to do that, or can just members do that and then ask the committee to look at it?
Really, yeah, it could be either way. It would, if a member submitted a letter to the chair, basically, we post it and could
Yeah.
discuss it if you wanted to.
Would you like to do that, Eric?
I could come up with a
Submit a letter.
draft letter and send it to you maybe in a week or so. And if you got it out to people, anyone could suggest amendments or whatever and see if we have something to act on it next month.
Or may I
yeah,
suggest
yes,
that if
proceed.
Eric wants to write something and submit it, it be submitted as an offering from a member.
Yeah.
Right.
Under
Anyone else could-
consideration at the next meeting, it
Yeah.
could be wordsmith if we need to make any changes, but it could be accepted or not at that time, I would say, and if it's agendized as an offering for consideration for action.
Makes sense
And
to
I'd
me.
be
Is that-
happy to see anyone else put out a draft too, and they might have a better draft than I would. They might be more on the front lines right now of the impacts of some of these firings. And so I certainly wouldn't object to having several letters, perhaps draft letters in front of the WRAC to be chosen from among, acted on or stitched together or whatever. But
That might
it's
get a little
something I will-
bit much, Eric. I think,
I will provide one.
yes.
And if anything else comes over the transom, that can be there too.
Perhaps if people have thoughts, provide them to Eric. And then Eric, you can consolidate and send us one, please, to Brendan and myself. And then we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
How would I read? Do you want me to read the bylaw for you that governs this
Oh, yeah.
situation? I'm like, I know there's
Can
something
we
in
do
here.
this? I mean,
Secretary, in cooperation with the chairperson, shall prepare the agenda for each regular and special meeting of the committee. Any committee member may contact the secretary and chairperson and request that an item be placed on the regular meeting agenda no later than, 4:30, 12 calendar days prior to the meeting date, and must be submitted in writing. And it would be considered then by the secretary and the chairperson in inclusion in the agenda. And for review with consistency of the district board of supervisor priorities and mandate to the committee and available time.
So
there's the
if I should
process.
have this in by 12 days before the next meeting, then anyone else who has something to add to the letter, if you're going to bounce it to me, that it would be helpful if I got it by 20 days before the next meeting, so I could incorporate it.
You want to use that? You want to use email as your ad hoc committee?
Yes, that's exactly what I want to do.
I
I
don't-
have transportation issues anyway, so I'm not looking for more in-person meetings.
I think if there's a group that wants to support you in the letter, we could form an ad hoc committee to do that, or we could consider your letter on the agenda. I'm not gonna facilitate a whole subcommittee via
Basically,
email.
I'll wait a week or so to see if I hear from other people with thoughts they want to put in a letter. And then I'll bang out a letter and get it to you in time for the next agenda that may very well incorporate anything I see from anyone else.
David Crater and then David Chip.
Is the 2025 legislative draft available, the one that got pulled back?
I guess yes, it would be it'd be in that board item. That
This
would,
would be a
yeah.
completely
back to
new
Jim.
plan.
So wouldn't it be preferable to read that, given that's probably. closer
I
to
thought that it
30?
was the 23 was attached to it, but I could be wrong there.
I looked at the 23, but
I think
we'll have to look again, David. Not certain.
I think it was the 23 was attached to the board item from 2 months ago.
2025 Draft was actually the 20.
Yes, I believe so. But I'd have to double check.
David Chip.
Although I agree with Eric that what's going on in Washington is abhorrent, I believe any letter that comes from here should establish a nexus between county interest and water. I don't think a sort of general thing on the Trump administration is bad in firing people. So I think I would like to see any letter that, like, including Eric's, that are submitted, establish some sort of nexus with the purview of the committee.
I think that's a good point,
Absolutely.
David. I think it
And
has to be.
I recognize, number one, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. Number two, I recognize that local government by way of the California Constitution is a party-free zone. And there's nothing, the intention is not to make a partisan statement. Believe me, I had plenty of criticisms for Biden when he was president, and every president I can think of going back, but the whole intent of this is to address how does it affect us in the county. For example, preparation for weather emergencies. Are we going to get thinned out in relation to the availability of that information in a timely and accurate way? And a lot of this, I don't know. We're kind of playing with how much, how many threads can we pull out of the fabric before it falls apart? And so I'm not sure I can write the letter based on knowledge, but we know what some of the people do. And if they're not doing it, then we can kind of visualize the problems that would arise.
Jim?
Yeah, so I just wonder if you guys have any concerns about that more problem here with an open email that we could all send to in theory.
No, that's why I'm not offering that.
But I'm just going to say if 20 of us, I know it's a shot, but if 20 of us sent him a comment.
No, that's not appropriate either. You need to make a committee or an ad hoc subcommittee to do what is being proposed. Correct.
So either he runs
It doesn't even have to be me. I'd be happy if anyone else wanted to take on this position.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the
Thank you, Jim.
clarification.
Appreciate that.
It's unduly complicated or to accomplish a very narrow goal. I understand what you're saying here, but I would suggest that anybody who wants to write to their county supervisor and suggest that they put that in their legislative rather than us trying to do it particularly on the fly. So I won't be here to vote on it if it happens, but I would suggest.
I will add that you're getting at kind of why I phrased this item the way I did to take the specific driver, say, away from the discussion and look at it as a whole, because there are a number of policies and items. If anyone looked through the document, like David mentioned, state water is in there, funding is in there. These are all a term I use, center circle issues for the flood control district. So if there was interest in reviewing that, then that's great. And things like this, things like specifically what Eric is talking about, could get folded into that group of comments. And actually, my commentary on what David said is correct. The nexus to how it benefits the county. So support, these federal programs that provide us, accurate forecasts and stream gauge services or whatever the different thing is, that there's value that provides value to this county. And we would like more. That'd be an example. That's why the way this is written, the item, I'm pointing to the item on the agenda, sorry. Why this item was written in the general form it was written in. So thank you for your comments.
Christine.
So I'm going to suggest that we do not create an ad hoc subcommittee. I agree with comments made that this is a huge issue. Like Eric, I'm not belonging to any party, we use that one. But we all read, and I think most of us are educated, we know the impacts of things that are happening nationally right now. And I don't think that our water committee is this place for starting to make comments on a huge national issue and advising or writing to the board about that. I think that we should stick a little closer to our home base here, the WRAC and its mission and purposes. And that any individual who wants to write and comment, we all should be doing that. Yeah. About anything and everything. I'm open to that, but it doesn't have to do with our.
I think you mean the
purview.
writing to the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right to the board, right to the states, any of your elected representatives, speak out, march, rally. I don't think that this issues here as presented is something that follows our mission and goals here. So I would recommend, I don't think we need a motion, but I will recommend that we do not form an ad hoc subcommittee and each individual address these issues as you will.
I certainly do quite a bit of writing to various, and I'm happy to continue to and not involve the WRAC in any way, shape, or form. My only thought in terms of if it came from the WRAC is that usually, if it came from the WRAC, it would actually become a consent item in front of the supervisors as part of the public record, wouldn't it?
Our letters don't necessarily cause that to happen. It does. We can't force. My understanding is we can't create items on the agenda.
So
We provide commentary to the board.
Well, then maybe I will just put my thoughts down on paper and get them where I think they need to go. And of course, a lot of that is to our own federal representatives as well.
Thank you.
This county has 2 House members, and of course, the state has 2 senators.
That's
I will relieve the WRAC of any responsibility for my thoughts.
Sweet, thank you.
all right. Good discussion, everybody.
I did enjoy that.
All right. Then we're on to item 5, election for vice chair. So we're still looking for an eager volunteer, and having chaired many groups, I can tell a willing volunteer that this is actually a very easy group to handle.
Nobody here has any vices.
Yeah. Yes.
This was passed over last time because no one volunteered. But
That's
you
correct.
did say that the vice chair is not asked to do much. I have in my years on this committee, many long years, 25 or something at least, been vice chair before and actually stepped in once to run a meeting, and I know how to run a meeting. And if you're looking for someone to fill a space on the paper, I would volunteer if you
I'd like to
want.
nominate Christine Mulholland.
This is. Okay, I see a motion. Is there a second?
Oh, who was the second? I want to make sure I got that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Christine. Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Don't get sick.
I promise. Yeah.
No vacation.
Well, I'm hoping don't get deported. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Christine.
Yes, thank you.
We were going to put it on next month's agenda and just wait until we wore someone down.
Yeah.
Write this down.
Now you're going to tell us about your 6-month sabbatical to study water systems in Patagonia.
Yeah, there you go. And so forth. All right, we'll go to ongoing updates then, starting with rain and reservoir. Any comment?
If you receive a mailed copy of the packet, the rain and reservoir report was accidentally omitted from that. So there is a hard copy in the back, but I believe the online version of the agenda packet had the rain and res inserted. So again, there's one in the back if you'd like to pick it up.
Drought updates. Groundwater basin management efforts. Greg.
I got quite a few things to say about the basis. Like the last time they were considering forming a JPA, which they've gone forward with. So they could not eliminate the MOA. So it takes a unanimous vote to eliminate the MOA. So the MOA is still in power, but on my understanding, 4 groups are withdrawing from the MOA, which is a provision in the MOA. It doesn't matter what's in the JPA. They have to provide what requirements are in the MOA if you want to withdraw, which they haven't done per letter of what's in the MOA. That's the first thing. Second thing is they just submitted the annual report. So you have 6 months to do the annual report, and they give 2 weeks at the end of that, before the 6 months is up, for public comment, and then try to turn it in. We don't know what the public comments were. We don't know if anything was changed. We don't even know if it's been submitted. It was supposed to be submitted yesterday. I have a letter here from last year where the state Department of Water Resources, and this letter was never shown to the group, from Paul Goslin, stating that last year's report was had a failure to provide all the information that was needed. And it was determined that it wasn't done right. And this should have been shown to the group at large and the people that supposedly have representation there that aren't representing them. Then we have a thing for the JPA, and the reason that they need the JPA instead of the MOA is so they can tax people. Because they don't have a mechanism, since they've already wasted all the grant money from the beginning of this thing. Nobody's put in any money per se in the millions that have been spent on forming the GPA or forming the groundwater plan or implementing anything. And the project they picked for the 7.6 million was spent on consultants and concept projects that not one has been developed. So they took millions of dollars for like a blended water project, and now they somehow just found out that there's PFAS and they can't use the treated wastewater to mix with nasty water. Then they have consultants, we have 2 now, they're being told by the groundwater agencies and their attorneys that they can't release any information on anything they're working on, which in this case is the rate study. And then what other well information they were supposed to be working on. So here we are, the taxpayers are paying for this consultant, and he can't release any information because they don't want to tell anybody what's going on. And it goes on and on and on. My point is, nobody wants these agencies doing anything. That's why I brought up the thing about private land and private wells. Anybody that lives over the unincorporated area that's not part of a quote unquote water district is their own GSA, is their own water district. They pay for their well, they pay for their electricity, they pay for their infrastructure, they do their maintenance, and the county is not their water district, and the county has no authority over their water use. Their job, as forming a GSA, was to manage what they already signed up to do, was what we already paid in our property taxes for the flood control and water conservation district, and all the other things that they took grant money for that they're supposed to be providing to people. So that's just a tidbit of what's going on with certain agencies. You have a minority of people in each of these different agencies other than Paso Robles, but Paso Robles landowners get water in the city. They don't get water, but it's their wells. It's the large corporate vineyard wells that are creating the problem, and they want somebody else to pay for it, for infrastructure and buying land and trying to say they're going to condemn people's things and do water projects and X, Y, and Z. And here we are 10 years later, they've done squat. And most of them have been there since 2005, so 20 years. Now this is all documented and everything. All you have to do is use your own paperwork to show what they've been up to and what they've been doing. And finally, a majority of the people, just like the Assembly Bill AB 2453, almost 80% voted that they did not want a special district. They did not want to tax themselves. And they did not want what was being planned, which we told them was going to happen 12 years ago. Well, here we are again, the same people. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. All right. Anything else on groundwater basin management? Flood control zones? Integrated regional water management. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So we're going region by region?
Oh.
Go back to basics.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd like to go back to the basin.
Certainly. Go right ahead, Jane.
Yeah, so, 87, mentioned earlier, has, through the groundwater sustainability, committee, looked into the possibility of, providing wastewater, excess wastewater on a seasonal basis to vendors. Recently, we've also gotten we put out an RFP and we got a response from Pre-Plans, which is a nonprofit creek restoration concern been going on for many years. When the vendors looked at the cost, right now they're saying that they're not interested. I don't know if this is like a firm decision, but Pre-Plans is still interested. So the excess water would be used for habitat restoration point. So it's still all tentative, but that's the way that it is.
A question actually on that, that would come before the city council at some sort of contractor agreement?
It's announced by the city manager. It's not a decision that the city council has to make. It was just like a status, like an updated status. I didn't think that I'll get in the concrete.
Yeah, if that's officially happening, I'd like to know about it, so yeah, that'd be cool.
So you said that the vendors were not interested because of the cost.
No, the city would not pay for the infrastructure to bring.
But Creeksland is still interested, do they have the money to?
Well, they wouldn't have to build the infrastructure.
Okay, so their use is not
I mean, it's just water
for the creek.
and creeks, yeah. So I think, I wanted to tell you all that, let me provide the bills with it. We just found this out last night.
Wow.
Breaking news. I think we had a question online. Brendan. Or Joey.
Jeff, go for it.
Hi, this was on the integrated regional water management. Is that timely?
Yes, go ahead.
So it's really a question, and my name is Jeff Edwards. And the question, I recall that there was, I think, $1 million earmarked for the Central Coast Blue project. And since that project is no longer really viable, I would ask that it be removed or the money be withdrawn. The agencies aren't the same, the project's not the same, the cost is unknown, and the financing is unknown. So it's really not a project. So if the money is being held, it should not be, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I should have an update on that in the next month or two.
Okay. We were on, then anything else on integrated regional water management? Some master water report updates.
I just wanted to add something
Yeah,
to what I said earlier on the tunnel. I don't know how many of you use Nathan's list, but Google it every day, just about. It has all the legislation that's going on, every newspaper, print on water issues, and it's a phenomenal font of information. So Nathan's list, that's where I got that information from.
Very good, thank you. State water project.
I'll just note on that one, after we printed this agenda, the state water subcontractor meeting that was scheduled for this Friday has been canceled. I believe the next meeting is in May, and they're continuing to work. Staff is continuing to work on the policies. As you know, Wes has been here a number of times recently. They're continuing to work on the policies, and we'll have updates as those as those get updated. So
look forward to seeing that again.
Yes.
Okay, DSAP. I think you mentioned that's going to be on the agenda perhaps next month.
Next month, I believe the stakeholder outreach or stakeholder engagement plan. Yeah.
Other thoughts on DSAP? Various county water programs, policies, and ordinances. And open reporting on water conservation opportunities information. See none, then going to future agenda items. Anybody have anything new, Greg?
Yeah, if anybody's interested, I think it would be an interesting thing to show the history the Nacimiento Dam and the Nacimiento Pipeline and the number of breaks and repairs and the cost and how many months the line's been shut down out of the total months that it's been open and what actual water use has come of it because of, like was brought up here earlier, the cost of the water is so much more expensive that it's not being used. So the supplemental water is being wasted at a tune of at least 10,000 acre feet a year.
Any other potential future agenda items?
Well, that the corollary issue, the chronic problem in Santa Margarita, I guess it's been on about 12, there have been 12 or so updates on the fix. Is it fixed?
I don't know. I'm sorry, not my.
The Nacimiento pipeline in Santa Margarita.
They say it's been fixed, Eric, but they haven't turned it on.
Oh.
Oh.
It went from 20 feet to 200 and some feet, from 20 million to a million. Pardon me, from 20,000 to a million. Something.
Right.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Mary.
At the beginning of the meeting, I have a question about whether or not, since so many of you have been in this group for a long time, is where the 5-year rolling average annual yield metric, like I see this rolling average used quite a lot in 5 years. And I'm wondering where this came from in the framework under Sigma. So like under the Los Osos one, which is like second to the last page, they have a 5-year rolling average annual base and yield metric. And I noticed with our well data down in Napomo, they do a 5-year average to determine if we're going to be in this route. I'm wondering where that metric is coming from and if it came down from the state and who is you putting together the statistics that would put us in that kind of a full 5-year metric when maybe we need to be at a 7-year or a 10-year or a 3-year. So I'm just trying to wonder where it came from and maybe you all know.
Anybody
Both those
know?
basins you mentioned are under adjudication, so I would assume it comes from the courts and it's part of the annual reporting process that,
So Los Osos has that,
yes.
Napomo has that,
Napomo is a part of
right?
not Napomo itself, but the Napomo Mesa Management Area is under an adjudication. They develop their own annual reports. And
Well, I don't even know what number you're talking about.
so maybe we could take it offline, yeah.
Talking about a 5-year moving average or something like that?
Yeah, like I see that in some of the documents that I'm reading, and I'm just kind of wondering where 5-year rolling data is coming from.
Well, provide me where you get that, I'll be able to respond to it.
It's basically a method to smooth out historical averages and not look at a single year or a single 2 years.
No, I understand that, but why is it 5 years is my question. Where is that coming from, especially when we're in drought for so long? It might have to do with the housing element that has to come up on 5-year cycle. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. It might have to do with the housing element that comes up in 5-year cycle. That's when they really look at the I was just curious because I see it pop up in several. Yeah.
All right. Any other future agenda items, David?
I'd like to hear something about the state water project takeout from the pipeline to Morro Bay into Los Osos, and what its costs are going to be and what its environmental problems are going to be in regard to South Bay Boulevard and things like that. So I don't know if that's right for discussion from the CSA, but at some point I'd like to get some more information on it than we've been getting.
I think currently that's the CSD project, but we could ask the CSD and so if it may not be, something they're ready to, talk about.
But we can add it to the list, David, and when they're ready, we'll ask them to come and tell us all about it. So, any other items? That's not, we'll adjourn the meeting and.
Public comment.
I'm sorry, Eric. I didn't see your.
This is brief, but Saturday, April 12th, Beaver Fest, Mission Plaza. They are very much our allies in relation to the health of our aquifers, our streams, and our climate and our our biodiversity and learn about and from the beavers and get to know some very cool people. Mission Plaza, Saturday, April 12th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Eric, they're good for Stetsons too.
Thank you, Greg. On that note, we will adjourn and, Ed. I'm sorry.
Long to talk about some coolest things, April 12th. Greenhouse Growers Association in the Como having its annual open house. Starts at 9 a.m. at Como High School on April 12th. And you start there and you get your cheapest vegetables and go off to all the other nurseries and get discounted everything.
My wife and I always participate. It's a wonderful opportunity for the home garden. Yes, lots of good stuff. Right. I'll say enjoy the rest of your spring day, everybody. See you next month.
Thank you.